Hi there, it's Reverend Daniel. I know it's been a long time since I've recorded one of these sermon videos. We're coming off of the of Christmas mayhem. The month of December was quite busy, and it seemed that try as I might, um, I just could not catch up. So I've decided that instead of catching up at this point, I'm just going to move forward with these videos. Thank you so much for watching these. And if you're watching these because you've volunteered in the church in some ways, thank you so much for your volunteerism. You really make this place what it is, a place worth coming to, a place that transforms hearts, minds, and souls, especially the hearts, minds, and souls of our littlest ones. So thank you so much for doing that. I appreciate it, and I know our whole church does. So the title of today's sermon was Make New Mistakes, and it was in the style of a New Orleans jazz funeral. So in the front of the sanctuary, if you could imagine, there was a box we called the coffin, decorated with flowers, and it was open the whole time. And the congregation was asked to write on slips of paper mistakes that they've made in the last year. And the service culminated with everyone coming up in procession down the center aisle and placing their slips of paper into the coffin. The coffin was sealed, thus burying the mistakes of the past year so that folks can move on and make new mistakes, because that's what it means to be alive. Now, the reading that went with today's sermon comes to us from Neil Gaiman. He's a popular author. I can't think of any titles, but he's well known. And he has something good to say. He titles this A Wish for the New Year. And here it goes. I hope that in this year to come you make mistakes. Because if you're making mistakes, then you're making new things, trying new things, learning, living, pushing yourself, changing yourself, changing your world. You're doing things you've never done before. And more importantly, you're doing something. So that's my wish for you. For all of us, my wish for myself. Make new mistakes. Make glorious, amazing mistakes. Make mistakes no one has ever made before. Don't freeze, don't stop, don't worry that it isn't good enough or it isn't perfect. Whatever it is, art or love or work or family or life, whatever it is you're scared of doing, do it. Make your mistakes next year and forever. Here ends our reading. With this sermon, I hope to accomplish one key thing, and I hope that it gives us permission to let go of the mistakes of the past with no promise of future perfection, but only continued hope. Mistakes, broadly defined, are the times where we miss the mark because we've forgotten the goal. Missing the mark because we've forgotten the goal. And it really is a deep kind of forgetfulness, more so than, say, misplacing the keys. It's misplacing the hope. It's forgetting that change is the nature of life and love, and ultimately forgetting that we will die. All of us will die. So, dearly beloved, friends, family, kind ones of diverse flavors and sorts, folks I've only met today, we are gathered here to celebrate the life and times and mark the passing of what was one of my greatest mistakes. He was born in Brooklyn, rather unexpectedly in 2007, and his given name, if you could believe it, was Peccatum Magnum. Peccatum Magnum, which I understand is Latin for big mistake. And I don't know how he came to have a Latin name, but I suppose that he was given it by his creator in some poetic flourish of one kind or another. But I call him Mags. Yes, Mags was a wry and salty fellow. And for a long time, we were quite inseparable. No matter how many times I tried to lose him, he kept finding me. Mags always had a way of whispering in my ear, holding my hand, and taking the wheel, driving me to places I never intended to go. I guess you could say that Mags had something of a magnetic personality. Perhaps, I don't know. But Mags could also be exhausting at times. Mags and I first met, you could say, rather that he came into my life as a simple request from my aunt, who recently purchased a large house in Brooklyn, not far from where I lived. The request, again, very simply, was to move whatever furniture I find in the new house from the upstairs to the basement. My aunt explained to me that the family who lived in the house left in a hurry, and they left behind lots of furniture. Leaving furniture behind is a not nice thing to do. You want to avoid it. And while she sorted through and decided what to keep and what to throw out, it would be best if those things were placed in the basement. And that way, she and her partner could start the renovations that the house needed. It seemed simple enough. If I can do anything, I can move furniture. When I arrived at the house, I found helpers moving things on the first floor, and they seemed to have everything there well in hand. And it was clear to me that my help wasn't needed there. That's when Mags first appeared, seemingly out of nowhere, because I can assure you he was not one of the helpers. Mags doesn't like to help usually. He suggested that we get a start on the second floor, and it seemed like a very good idea, so I went up. Now, there were two doors on the second floor, and one of those doors was wide open. I entered the room, and it was really a mess. Someone clearly left this place in a hurry, and Mags agreed. I moved the wretched furniture. There was a lot of particle board stuff downstairs to the basement, and it all went rather quickly. There was no problem moving these things downstairs. And when I went back up, I noticed that there was a door in that room. And that door, it turns out, led to another room. The door wasn't locked, but it was blocked. It was held in place by a heavy table on the other side. That seemed odd, but Mags didn't think so, and I guess I didn't really think so at the time. We were both curious and eager to please, so I pushed a bit, and the door gave way. And then I was on the other side, another part of the second floor, and crossing that threshold really cemented my relationship with Mags for years to come. Once I crossed that threshold, I was entering a second apartment in what was, I came to find out, a two-family home. The second family hadn't actually moved out at that point, while the others, both downstairs and in the single room, they had already moved. Oh, hindsight. They say that it's 2020, and they say that foresight is bought at the price of anxiety. And who wants anxiety? I suppose the clues were all there. The room in this part of the house, all the rooms, in fact, were remarkably intact. But I let my judgment and my condemnations get the best of me. I thought, all knowingly, at the time, how disgusting it was that the last occupants made so little effort at leaving. I mean, just look at all of the stuff they left behind. Now, my grandfather was a landlord of rental properties, and I could remember him telling me stories of how delinquent tenants living in apartments would sometimes stay there for months, never paying any rent. And just before they received a, a warrant of eviction, they would move out, taking only the clothes on their backs, leaving behind random bags and assorted pieces of furniture. What an awful way to live. And I knew in that moment that when I crossed that threshold that I stumbled onto the worst example of that sort of delinquency and indecency. Because here, they made no pretense of moving at all. In fact, there were still clothes in the drawers. I had a very low opinion of the people who had lived there and took pleasure in putting all of their unwanted items away in the basement. And Mags was there to encourage me the whole time. I got as much done as a single person could, and the helpers never came up in the end. Mags was generally no help. In fact, he has a special way of making things harder in the end. It was time for me to quit. I had a quick lunch and took the train because that night I had class. And my classes were in Manhattan. I was still in college. I left the big pieces of furniture for the guys working downstairs. Mags left with me. It wasn't very long before I was seated in my class, attending to whatever was being lectured at that moment. And after some time had passed, we received a visitor to the class. A woman came from student services to fetch me. Apparently, there was an issue of some kind, and I needed to go to her office. On the way there, she told me that there was a phone call waiting for me. My gosh, I thought, who died while I was in class? I hope it wasn't Mags. No, it wasn't Mags. In fact, it was my aunt on the phone, and she needed to speak to me. When I got on the phone, I could hear the clear and deliberate and restrained voice of pure panic. "Danny," she said, "you've made a big mistake." My aunt said that she was on her way at that very moment to pick me up from school because the police were waiting at her house to speak to me. On the ride back to Brooklyn, as we crossed over the Brooklyn Bridge, it became clearer and clearer that I had, in fact, made a very big mistake. I accidentally moved a single mom and her baby out of their home. And that mom was waiting for me, and she was foaming at the mouth with good reason. Now, even though she had been given notice to vacate the premises when the house was sold, she hadn't done so. And that left me thinking, whoa, what have I done? Well, I'll tell you what I did. I committed the crime known as illegal eviction, and the police wanted to arrest me. And the distressed mom was standing there in the room with them, justified in demanding that they do so. As I faced her and the officers and my aunt and her partner, I thought, how could I have been so stupid? The only thing I wanted to do in that moment was to crawl into a hole and die from my embarrassment. I don't know what Mags thought at the time, but his silence was deafening. But I knew he was there. He stayed with me from that moment to this one. And with him came guilt and shame, lots of shame, regret, avoiding connections to others who might find out that I had done such an awful and short-sighted thing. He was a burden that I carried ever since. Now, I wasn't arrested that night. Fortunately, it pays to have an aunt whose partner is an attorney. And that single mom was paid damages for the property that couldn't be salvaged. And she and her daughter were allowed to stay additional months in the apartment while the renovations were underway in other parts. I wrote an apology letter to her and it was accepted. And I think the woman in time came to hate me less. But yikes, what an ordeal. Mags really put me through it. It was a big mistake. And I hope to put that mistake to rest today. And that is why we are gathered, to give Mags and others like him the proper send-off to eternal rest that they so rightfully deserve. While Mags held me back in so many ways, the self-doubt in particular could be really debilitating. He also reminded me of something very important. And if we really want to understand just what kind of person Mags was, you have to understand this. He taught me something about the nature of being a human being. Mags showed me that missing the mark, looking foolish, showing up long after the boat has set sail, are all parts of the glorious gift of being alive and growing. Now, we can't undo the past, but we can let go of aspects of the past paths that no longer serve us so that we can move on. And Mags really taught me that. He taught me that great, capable, confident minds can often outsmart themselves, as I had. And it's better in the end to be less effective, slow, and ask many, many questions rather than knowing everything. During my time with Mags, he revealed the painful consequences of taking on the air of gods and goddesses, all knowing, all seeing, all judging, all condemning. These are gifts that don't belong to mere mortals. The philosopher Paul Woodard writes by way of analogy that we incur the wrath of the gods by pretending to be them, and the divine retribution is often swift and relentless. Our downfall soon follows. So don't fly quite so high, Icarus. The risks for us are always very, very high when we forget that we will make mistakes. And also that we will hold on to them, perhaps longer than we need to. And that we will act in ways that will betray ourselves, our highest principles, and even the people that we love. There's a kind of forgetfulness that lends itself to mistakes, and holding on to them for too long is another kind of forgetfulness. It's forgetting that we are in fact human. And if there's any message that you get from me over the course of my ministry here, is that we're trying to reconnect with what makes us essentially human. That's what it means to be religious. Religious life for us, especially as Unitarian Universalists, is about finding new and better ways to become more fully human. Now, Paul Woodard, in his book, Reverence Reclaiming a Forgotten Virtue, writes, how could I forget? This is a question that he asked himself. How can anyone forget that they're human? And he answers that question by saying that it's a very easy thing to do. If you are so rich, he writes, or so powerful, or so successful that you push every thought of failure out of your mind, every thought of human error, madness, or death. That's how. And he continues, but you will err. If you're human, you will do crazy things, no matter how hard you cling on to the notion that your mind is sound, and you will die. But between now and death, he continues, you will have many opportunities to crash down from whatever height you've reached, and you will fall harder if you forget that the human path is in fact strewn with stumbling blocks. If Mags has done anything for me, he helped me to see more clearly just how many stumbling blocks there are on this path of life. And he also helped me to see that holding on to those stumbling blocks never serves us in the long run. Now let us think for a moment about our own stumbling blocks, the ways that we've forgotten our own essential nature, the ways that are written on the cards in your hand right now. I encourage you to remember, and I encourage you to acknowledge, to confess even, the experiences you've had with Mags as you knew him in so many different ways. Mags has had an impact on all of us over the years. That's why we are here today. And our ability to put Mags to rest comes from faith and hope. The relentless optimism of our religious tradition as Unitarian Universalists guides our hand in laying Mags to rest today. We believe that change is possible wherever we find ourselves on the path, and we anticipate the future and we see our place in it. A future that will be hard to get to if we're holding on to too much. So we let go because we are a people of hope, not a people of mistakes, not a people of sin, not a people of fear, but hope. So how are we living out that hope today? I hope it's by burying the mistakes of the past, by acknowledging the hurt, the shame, the fear, learning lessons where we need to, letting go so that we can move on and reconnect. And I'm sure that is what Mags would want for all of us, to let go when the time comes and allow ourselves to make new mistakes. Because making room for them allows for so much. To go back to our reading by Neil Gaiman, we're making room for new things, for trying new things, for leaving, for loving, for moving, for pushing, for acknowledging, for changing, for growing. Make room for even more mistakes, glorious, extravagant mistakes, mistakes that might in fact pull us forward this year, next year, forever. So, Mags, farewell. Now cracks a noble heart. Good night, sweet prince, and may flights of angels sing you to your rest. Amen, and blessed be.